Mr. Chairman. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Yesterday, Director General Simons told us that the panelists should avoid the PowerPoint and all that if possible, but he also allowed us to use it if he felt it would be necessary. So I take that and I would use a few PowerPoint slides to make my points. Again, it was very exciting to hear the presentations this morning by our keynote speakers, and I'm really catching on them and following on some of the ideas that they have presented. And in this conference, we have heard so many talks. I took this number, approximately 200, from one of the early website presentations of the Congress. It may have been more. We all hear, we have been hearing repeatedly over the past 3 decades or more that agroforestry can do this and that. Agroforestry has got so many potentials, so many benefits, so many advantages, so many applications, so on and so forth. So we have heard a lot of these things over the years, and we also heard a lot of them in this Congress. Wonderful, this was expected. But I think we need to take a moment and sit and relax and think about that. This has been talked about, but what has been said? I would say, in spite of all these talks, it seems only a little new is being said. So I challenge the audience to take upon themselves and see how much of what has been said is new. Because there is a difference between opinion and facts. Everybody has the right to his or her opinion, and opinions based on gut feeling, the so-called gut feeling, leads to lots of claims about potentials and benefits and opportunities and advantages and all that. But opinions are different from facts. See, all the radio talk shows and political commentators and scientists and journalists, everybody has got the right to the opinions. But I think it is our duty as scientists to bring out separate the grain from the chaff and bring the science out. A claim becomes valid only when it is proven by facts. And there are principles and procedures of getting these things done in science. And we need to validate our claims by hard facts. And that is the challenge of science, because and science is based on facts. So that is my challenge. And in evaluating science and pursuing science, we need to realize that there is good science and bad science. All reported science, unfortunately, all reported results are not trustworthy. We come across lots of shoddy experiments, flawed procedures, poor analysis. Well, no problem, we will get them published. Well, getting them published alone does not mean that, thank you, but getting them published alone does not mean that we have established something new. And that's a big challenge. The hallowed peer review process that we all have come up through has lost some of its shine. It has become sometimes it has become a sort of mockery. This is very, very bad. And the blame goes to the publish or perish doctrine that we all have lived through. When I was a graduate student 40, 50 years ago, it was the axiom. And it is much more powerful axiom today that if you don't publish, you perish. And by corollary, if you publish, you prosper. So there is a lot of rush for publishing, and in that process, a lot of, if I may say, a lot of things get published which are not publishable. And then we have a problem of cherry picking of results. And Kate has already alluded to this thing. We have a tendency as scientists to take only things that we want to take, not what we need to take. That's really unfortunate. Negative results are seldom reported. They are not favored in publications. And for example, about 2 decades ago, in the 1990s, early 1990s, only about 30% of papers published, about 30% of the papers published negative results. But today, the estimate is that only about 15% of negative results are reported. But negative results are results. We need to report them, we need to understand them, we need to evaluate them. Then only we can make progress. So, out of the 200 talks at this Congress, let us ask how many of them are based on opinion versus facts? How many of them have presented new hypotheses? How many papers with results that can be replicated have been presented? How many negative results have been reported? Because at the end of the day, when we are evaluating, assessing the breakthroughs and innovations coming out of the Congress, we have to take stock of the situation and ask some hard questions. Are we really facing an intellectual bankruptcy in agroforestry? I don't want to elaborate on that, but think about that. And also, to me, it seems that there's a lot of rush in commercialization of agroforestry. When we started agroforestry 3-4 decades ago, the emphasis was on smallholder farmers, resource-poor situations, and so on and so forth. It still is today, but we have, I think, a tendency to commercialize it, inviting lots of business investments and all that. My dear friends, don't forget that the green revolution has become a greed revolution. So we don't want to fall into that trap. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think Professor Nair does not need any introduction. He's one of the founding members of Agroforestry, and of course, he's currently the distinguished professor and director of the Center of Subtropical Agroforestry. May I then call upon Eduardo Somarriba, distinguished scientist at CATIE.
Thank you very much. After working yesterday through all this long list of posters, you always have this impression that there is so much that you can tell about agroforestry, the different examples, how it works in this condition, all the combination of crops and trees, new methods. I was very happy to see eco studies in soils, new instrumentation, science, political science, communications becoming upfront, not only all the biophysical, although still a lot of biophysical work and not so much social and political work, but this is happening. We're looking at clones, the integration of clones in agroforestry. So it is true there is a lot of things that we've been seeing for the last 32 years, all this productivity analysis in different combinations, they're there, but there's some new things happening. But together, the presentations, panel discussions, and posters that we've seen reveal some key problems. Lack of generality, for example, is something that really brings to my attention. Many of the studies are site-specific, and maybe this brings this problem of replication. Can we replicate the results? Can we generalize? This is one issue that needs to be taken into consideration. We also discussed a lot about the deficiencies in the communication of the results, the knowledge, to science, to farmers, but not only to farmers, to the other stakeholders in the agroforestry value chains. The need to address some specific issues that are related to the trees themselves. Agroforestry, with the trees, face many of the same problems forestry have dealt with for many years. Rules, legislation that is not favorable to the planting and the use of the trees. Many cultural beliefs, tenure problems, the role of women in trees. All these problems were detected. The lack of institutional development. We need institution. If I go to Nicaragua and I want to talk about agroforestry, where do I go? Do I go to the forestry department? Do I go to the agriculture department? Our Indian colleagues are trying a new model, creating an intergovernmental platform, but still there's going to be some institutional problem. What are the real representation of agroforestry in the institution? And that will have implication for policy and for programs, supporting programs. We need better enabling environments. We also face this issue of long waiting periods to recover the benefit from trees. And most of us, farmers included, are short-term planners. We want things right now. The problems are now here. And we also talk about the disconnection between science and development, between producers and markets, between farming and business, and so on and so forth. So this brings an obligatory questions. And this is, if we solve these problems, will we solve the problem of agroforestry? And I think not. Some time ago, Dennis Garrity said, what do we have to do to ensure that agroforestry spreads like a bushfire? I think it's a very important question. And we can find examples of the opposite of all the problems we have seen. I worked in the Andes for some time, and I saw the expansion of the cultivation of coca in the highlands. The worst enabling environment for coca production, yet coca was expanding everywhere. There was no communication channels, and everybody knew about how to grow coca. There was no research, but all the innovations were there. So there's something happening. Do we have to work with legal trees? I don't know. Maybe we have to look for value of the trees. If you look at other crops, like coffee, for example, in Latin America, you have all the development, all the institutional development is there, the technology is there, the knowledge in the farmers, but yet we still have a lot of problems. Not everybody is using all the technology. We still have environmental problems. So we need high-value crops. We need a highly integrated science. So I was kind of getting depressed. No? We got all these things happening in all the science. We have examples that if we solve those problems that we face in agroforestry, yet we'll not be able to make agroforestry the most important land use and solve the problems we wanted to solve. I think there is a way out, but we have to be moderate in our expectations. We have to prepare for long battle. Agroforestry is a long-term crop, and we have to systematically address all these issues. Nothing's going to happen from one day to the next. We need some things we need. For example, we need to devote more work to create a good institutional framework. I think this is crucial. If we don't have the framework, then it will not be possible to have long-term planning. And this will bring in the policies and the program to support the development of agroforestry. We need to mainstream agroforestry and education. Education is key at all levels, from farmer field schools, farmer-to-farmer program, short-term program for extension workers at the university level, BS and postdoc level. We need education and education and education. We need a science which has generality, applicability, but it has to also need to be applicable in very specific condition and context. So we need generality and specificity. Maybe we need to do more meta-analysis. We have to integrate science into the development process. And this will have implications for setting the agendas. We need a demand-driven science more than an offer-given science. We have to give a lot of attention to effective communication with all the stakeholders, not only with farmers. And we're focusing too much on farmers. We have to really look at the entire agroforestry value chains. We have to work on all the models, farmer to farmer, farmer field schools, traditional existing systems, all the new technologies, cellular phones, and so on and so forth. Integration is a key word. Production to markets, farmers to science, private and public, women in all the spheres of action. We need to add value to the three products, maybe the coca syndrome. Traders, donors, policymakers should be integrated also in the next World Agroforestry Congress. Integration is key. So I have a final reflection on science. We normally think as researchers when we gather in these meetings that science is everything. We're assuming really on science. It's a big zoom. When we look at the investment in science, we're talking about 1–2% of GDP in most conditions. And this is the reality. But we look from the science context and we think we are the best important. We think it is granted. And we really have to really place science in the general dimensions. When you look, for example, at the cocoa sector or coffee sector, in Costa Rica, coffee produced 2.5 million sacks at $200 each. That gives you $500 million worth every year. And you multiply that by 5 or 10, that will be the impact on other spheres of the society. That's a lot of money. When you think about the amount of money that we invest in science in coffee, that's a very tiny, tiny fraction of it. And we want to move this big ship with a very small amount of money. So we have to give science the proper dimension it takes. We ask the scientific community to provide solutions to all these problems, but we have to be reasonable. We really have to make sure that not only scientists, but the rest of the society that is involved in the agroforestry value chain has to be involved. If we don't get them involved, there will be no possibility for us scientists to really make a big change. We have to involve the governments, the policy decision makers, and the educational systems. Agroforestry development is an integral problem. We had a first wave of agroforestry in the 80s and 90s. Everybody wanted to talk about agroforestry. Then it was silent for some time. Now it's back again. This is a second wave of agroforestry. We have to ride the second wave the best way we can, like masters. But one thing is true, we need more trees, and this is what we are here for. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much, Eduardo. And now it's my pleasure to introduce the Professor Eduardo Rojas, the Assistant Director General of Forestry at FAO, Rome. Professor.
Chair, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. It's a very special pleasure and honor to address you today on the occasion of the World Agroforest Congress held in Delhi, capital of India this week. I would like to commend the two co-hosting partners, the Government of India through the Indian Council of Agricultural Research and the World Agroforest Center, ICRAF, for convening this Congress. The joint leadership has been able to gain momentum and to bring agroforestry into the international agenda. India has been very successful in the past years to stop and revert deforestation by empowering rural communities in forest management and promoting agroforestry. Despite the huge pressure on land, the forest area is growing, and trees outside forests produce socioeconomic benefits for millions of rural people in this historic and impressive country. As chair of the Collaborative Partnership on Forest, the CPF, I am much honored as well to attend this Congress in which one of our most committed members, ICRAF, has been leading. Allow me to recall that ICRAF's Director General, Tony Simons, is presently the Vice Chair of the CPF. I would as well like to recall the late Michel Gauthier, FAO's extremely committed agroforest officer who unexpectedly passed away exactly 1 year ago. But why is agroforestry crucial now? The present food production model is not suited for many tropical and subtropical countries, generating important environmental impacts, mainly deforestation, but not only deforestation, as well as social tensions and neglecting diversification opportunities. In a people-centered approach, agroforestry in its 1,000 modalities is much more successful to combine in harmonic synergy diversified food production, fuel for cooking and heating, non-wood forest products, building materials, environmental services, and resilience, both of income, fodder for cattle, especially in dry periods, and disasters, including climate change. Agroforestry, in that sense, is the quintessence of climate-smart agriculture. A significant part of the world's poor people are rural population, and agroforestry is one of the strategies to overcome rural poverty. Agroforestry has a unique potential to preserve cultural heritage and traditional knowledge that by both standard options, either migration to cities or conventional agriculture, is condemned to be lost. And I would think this cultural function has also to be kept and retained. Agroforestry is the single land use that can combine food production, and we still have 842 million hungry people worldwide, with environmental services provided by tree cover in dense populated countries like India, characterized by smallholder structures. And more than 2 billion rural poor depend on firewood for cooking and heating. And agroforestry is a crucial option to ensure sustainable, near, and reliable supply. And in drylands, very especially, the firewood collection is the main reason for forest degradation. I would also like to recall one of the models of agroforestry, which is the silvopastoral model, which is a very interesting opportunity for producing animal protein with low greenhouse gases and no demand of cereal. And this is the big challenge for 2050 to ensuring food security for the growing population. It's not so much the growth in absolute term or relative terms, it's very especially the growth of meat and animal protein that is creating worries for 2050. In that sense, silvopastoral models may be very interesting, and in difference to the more strict agroforest models, they are much more of big scale on communal lands than the traditional one. So it's important also to keep the silvopastoral approach as well. But what impedes the expansion of agroforestry? On one hand, the institutional aspects, due to the scattered administrative responsibilities divided between ministries of agriculture and environment, and even if both sides, the agro and the forest part, are in agriculture, the different services are normally quite of different nature, and even frequently we get not the correspondent statistics, the land of a country. If you add the forest and agricultural land, then there is more land used than the country's area. So we have really frequently problems here of statistics as well. And if we go to the present process of the SDGs as well, where will agroforestry fit? Into the food SDGs or into the natural resource or ecosystem SDG. So as well, there is a challenge regarding institutional scatterment. The governance, a lack of insufficient enabling environment, especially in the legislation and in tenure, the lack of tailored financial instrument, the lack of sufficient trustful statistics that is also linked to the poor possibility for research to work if there is very little basic statistics to work with. And of course, also from the research part, this was commented by before speaking, the fact that agroforestry is that much multifaceted, which is a wealth, makes big challenges for research, especially if not sufficient critical mass is achieved. So what can we do to enable and to spread agroforestry? From FAO side, we're working hard to contribute by our normative products like the agroforest policy guide, the contribution to the Great Green Wall for the Sahara and the Sahara Initiative, the Forest Landscape Restoration Mechanism, the Safe and Grow Initiative, the Climate Smart Agriculture, regional initiative like the RISE one here in Asia, the Forest and Farm Facility, the Sustainable Forest Management Toolbox, the voluntary guidelines on responsible tenure of land, the assessment of trees outside forestry, of forest, e-learning, and very especially the International Conference on Forest and Food Security held in last May in Rome that many of you might have attended. But I would like also to recall that it's very important the fact of communicating this message of agroforestry, and for sure congresses like this are a big occasion, and for sure 2015 brings as well a very good occasion due to the chance of the International Year of Family Farming. And I would also like to recall the chance next year of Expo Milan devoted to food, where a big occasion exists, especially in the countries that are important in agroforestry, to highlight the role of agroforestry in the national pavilion. And as Commissioner General for the UN for Expo 2015, I invite you to take all these opportunities and to work with the UN in that sense. Allow me to close expressing that agroforestry is the third path that can answer the challenges we face regarding food, climate change, and overcoming rural poverty in a balanced and consistent way. And if we take or not, the chance will depend on the momentum we are able to create and to grow. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much, Professor Rojas, for that insightful and telling us what FAO is trying to do and contributing to agroforestry development in the whole world. Last but not least, it's my pleasure to introduce Gunathilake, the Director of the Coconut Research Institute, Sri Lanka.
Good morning. Thank you very much for giving this opportunity by CRAF and ICR and all organizers. I represent Coconut Research Institute of Sri Lanka. Very interesting keynote to address, and it evoked our knowledge and our what we did last 30 years of our research on agroforestry and I learned a lot from your technical presentation. I think those were the keywords attract me: land sharing, nitrogen cycle, multiple crops, carbon storage, social foundation, job opportunities, space for humanity, and agroforestry for whom. So, with my knowledge, I think first is the agroforestry should focus, in my recommendation, it look at the country's development program. Very simply, in Sri Lanka, we are totally dependent on the energy importation petroleum. So one of the main expenditure, half of the foreign exchange we spend for importation of petroleum. So that's give the agroforestry give the vast opportunity to apply in our country on renewable energy sector. Second thing, as you said, we are a developing nation, island nation, and again our food habits are very rapidly changing now. In 1970s, it was so popular on demanding for carbohydrate, rice and other tuber crops. But we are now in the era of consumption oil and protein. But now oil for coconut we are getting oil, and oil palm is also has introduced. Now we are coming halfway of self-sufficiency on vegetable oil section. But the question is the protein. Now it was 80% of our milk actually imported as a powdered milk to the country. Now the government clearly declared we must self-sufficient by cattle milk production and other protein demand 100% by another 2-3 years time. So thanks for ICRAF. We are taking your knowledge and your experience and all things in our country, how we can help agroforestry to achieve our protein requirement and so on. So again, another point, I really represent the coconut sector. It's a perennial crop, 6 years of lifespan, very vast opportunity to apply agroforestry. That, dear colleagues, friends, over the last 35 years, we heavily applied agroforestry, whatever the knowledge, theoretical or whatever, trees on to integrated coconut-based farming system. I think we publish many articles, books on that. And that is why in country, more than 40 years ago, I remember, we haven't had epilipid Gisidia in our world. But now, you never believe the Gisidia, one of the very attractive agroforestry tree, we declared as a fourth plantation crop. Tea, rubber, coconut, never believe this agroforestry tree. The government cabinet declared as the fourth plantation crop because of the agroforestry intervention through the Coconut Research Institute in Sri Lanka. Thanks once again for ICRAF and Oxford Forestry Research Institute. I remember even the Professor Gunathilake is also here. In 1980s, I just participated as a young scientist on multiple tree legume program, multiple tree system, MPTS program. That was the beginning in agroforestry. Later on, we were able to build up a very good relationship with the ICRAF. Remember on that. In 2011, we signed an MOU. Thanks for Kenya and ICRAF for helping us to rethink and redirect our program. So in agroforestry, we are now really applying in Sri Lanka agriculture, the food production, fodder for, as I explained, the milk, and fuel, energy. And again, there was another very recent question on that. Use of fertilizers for fertilizers and other input for some tree farming system. But in one project I said, the GCDA and other these agroforestry trees, those are fertilizer trees. Remember Dr. Simon? So most of you participated in Sri Lanka, one of the agroforestry research program. I think we declared the GCDA and those trees are fertilizer trees to enrich our soil. That is why I support your nitrogen cycle. I think we know now 150 kilograms of biological nitrogen could be achieved in our soil by cultivation of Gisidia I think we did over the 20 years of experimentation. Another point I wish to make it out, use of land sharing on crop production and energy crop production. There was some belief by FAO, I don't know. What I have seen it, always the food crisis emerged through the energy crisis. 1971 example, another one in the 2010. So both 2 decades, both 2 years, the Sri Lanka also suffered on the food, similarly the energy. So then, can we separate energy and food cropland? So my personal view is, it should be a complementary, not competitive. I give a good example. I am now, lastly, I wish to give you 2 examples. One of the diversified river program in Sri Lanka, called Mahaveli. So there are some land people living in irrigated land and others are upland land, no irrigation facility. One village, not a village actually, area called Kajuatta, there are 560 families. So they are not supported by irrigated land. So their income was so low, lot of poverty was there, one example. So then we introduced cattle for them. We thought the milk production is very attractive for them. So what are the trees, the fodders, what are the grasses? No irrigation. So Girisiya, one of the trees, we introduced to them. Over the last 5 years, they completely grown their Girisiya, used the paddy straw. They themselves found the good feeding for animals. So now, all the 560 families, I am live with them now. So they are producing at least 15 liters of milk per animal. It is okay for our country, our situation. They are the 2 things they develop. One in the outside income. Secondly, their family nutrition. So that is again support for the keynote address in the morning. One good example. Yesterday, it was a very attractive presentation on business, agroforestry and its business. Today I am here, I am working now for the energy project, 10 megawatt power plant, wood-based renewable energy. So that project involved 3,500 hectares of land. So by this September, we will have to plant 4 million Girisiya trees to get 400 metric tons of Girisiya wood per day to run a 10 megawatt power plant. Can you imagine the involvement of the job opportunities, families, land, sharing, nitrogen, whatever your organic carbon and environmental service. So that project is now scheduled in this country by another next year to add another 10 megawatt power to the Eastern Power project, Eastern Power Supply. So with that, with this remark, I appreciate the 2 keynote addresses. We learn a lot and we can readjust our thinking and future direction. And again, I think those things support us agroforestry in our country. I am very proudly say it helps for food security in Sri Lanka, and energy security is most important, and again the environmental services. So that is why I believe the world is getting better. The agroforestry support for that. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much. Members, we are just on time. It's exactly 1:30. But I don't want to be able to stop without giving an opportunity to members of the public to be able to interact with the participants. I'll give about 3 to 4 questions to the plenary members to be able to actually interact with our keynote speakers as well as our plenary speakers. May we have the lights on so that we can be able to see? We'll begin from that end. Yes, please, you have to introduce your name, yourself, and of course, be very brief with the questions.
Thank you very much. I'm called Simon from the Parliament Forum on Climate Change, Uganda. I think we are happy with the proceedings so far, and one of the aspects that are coming out from the several presenters is the gap between science and policies. So personally, we have been working on this in our country, and I've been asking myself, how can these scientific technologies begin becoming integral parts of government advisory services in agriculture, in the agricultural department? Other strategies also needs to be instituted. For example, how best do we take these technologies and make them convincing to the politicians? One of them, I think, would be simplifying our languages and telling the politicians that actually their votes can be enhanced by good agroforestry practices. Otherwise, if we tell them the technical jargons, they become disinterested in some of the things we do. I thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We'll take questions, and then, of course, we'll invite the panelists to be able to respond. From that end? Okay, we move to the other side. Yes. Please, your name, and, of course, the question. Yeah, the lady. Logistics team.
My name is Pranita Mudliar. I'm a PhD student at the Ohio State University, and I was really interested in the comment on generalability and replicability. So isn't there value in doing case studies and site-specific research, which is supposed to be contextual, because contexts are so different and landscapes are so different? So isn't there value in doing context-specific research, which might uncover certain variables, and maybe that can be tied to different sites or contexts?
Thank you very much. Yes, yourself.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Augusta. I'm a Muvuli Trust delegate in this conference, but I'm also from Uganda. I very much got touched by the issues concerning effective communication of all the initiatives, research projects related to agroforestry. I come from a communications background. In all that has been said here, and in all that is being done by the researchers, in as long as we do not effectively communicate what we conceptualize and what we discuss in big conference rooms like this, we are not delivering development to the people that we serve. What I'm saying is we need to translate the science we have seen, especially on the posters, into consumable language that our communities can consume. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I take that one more of a comment. Let's have the other end. Yes. Okay, then the last one will be at the end. So let's have our sister there, and then at the end.
Thank you very much, the Chair. I'm Alice Mushugi from Wild Agroforestry Center in Nairobi, and I'm picking up on a comment that was raised by Professor Nair on what we are looking at into the innovations in science, actually in agroforestry. And my concern more is on the tree breeding with the species that we have in the agroforestry. Looking through the presentations that we are having and also the posters that were raised, I looked through and I really looked through to see the topic of genomics coming up. If this was a crop or a health forum, you'd see the issues, because the research technologies that are coming up is understanding the genomes of the organisms, whether it is animals or plants and even the human. But it looks like within the tropics, because most of us here, the presentations were more within the tropics, is that we are neglecting understanding the tree components from the genomic aspect. And I do appreciate, and I'm happy that when Howard mentioned on the sequencing of the 101 genome, that we'll be understanding in that. So my issue is that the tree breeders, is that we look into more into improving, even on the trees, as much as we are doing the action research on the farms, we also need to improve on the trees that we are saying they are good for agroforestry, not just removing them from the natural resources and placing them on the farms. So mine is just a comment, but not on the question, on the areas that we really need to look into. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The last person at the end.
Thank you very much. My comment is possibly directed to Professor Nair, although a few others also made comments on the area, excuse me, on the area of not publishing so-called negative results. Professor Nair, I've been your student for the last 20 years, although you don't know it. And given your provocative talk, it looks like I'll be your student for a while. I am a scientist in business. I'm from the private sector in Kenya. And I started working on indigenous fruits in the Miombo woodlands in Tanzania some 19 years ago. And even there are some unpublished results because some of the negative results that came out of propagation trials. Now, interestingly enough, being in business, I have learned that ultimately we succeed because we fail. We know what it means to fail, and we know what it means to succeed. We fall, we get up, we fall again, we get up again. And that's how ultimately we succeed in business. And the reason it allows us to do that is because we have a long-term vision. And that's what allows us to go through these cycles. Are they painful? Definitely. Is it pleasant? No. But is it necessary? It is. And so I wanted to just re-emphasize that in order for science to be successful, we need a long-term vision. I don't think we can have short-term funding cycles. I don't think we can have short-term vision when it comes to science, and especially the science of agroforestry, if we want to claim to have good science. And so it is my hope that those of you who are leading the work in agroforestry, such as yourself, Professor Nair, as well as the Agroforestry Research Center, and as well as others, that the challenge I'd like to put forward is that out of this conference, we would have a commitment to report all results.
Sorry, may I request that you be brief?
Yes,
Yeah.
and that is my question, whether that could be a key result coming out of this conference, that we would report all results, be they so-called negative results, but also positive results, so that we can focus on the long-term science of agroforestry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, sir.
I think she was the last speaker.
Yeah, yes, sir.
Allow me to, because of time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, sir.
No. I'm saying that we have come to the end of questions. We need to manage time. Allow me to manage time. Yes, I think we come to the end. I want to appreciate that. I would request that you interact with the panelists during tea break. That will offer us a good opportunity. But I realize that we're having 2 comments and 3 questions. And the last speaker directed her question to Professor Pikenia. I would like that he responds to that. Prof, you'll be brief because of time.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Yes, I really appreciate that at least some people found my brief intervention provocative, and that was the objective. That's very good. I mean, I really appreciate what you said, the last speaker. Somebody also mentioned, because they brought up the issue of location-specific research versus replicability. All these are all issues that we always discuss in science and agroforestry research. I will be very happy to discuss that further. Now, Albert Einstein once said that if you have not made any mistake, those who have not made any mistakes, that means they haven't done anything.
Thank you very much, members. I think you'll have to pair with me because of time, and we really have to be able to manage the time. For the sake of that, I would like us to be able to call on Kat to make her closing remarks, then followed by Tatiana. Kat?
Just to say that I thought all those interventions from the floor were really excellent. There was a lot of discussion about communication and getting our message across. I think we perhaps are a bit self-defeating because partly due to funding cycles and funding pressures, we invent new names for the same things over and over again, and which just ends up confusing people. My own work started off very much under sort of people and plants banner. I'm now talking about ecosystem services approaches. We have landscape approaches, eco-agriculture, evergreen agriculture, socio-ecological systems, and agroforestry, and yet we're all trying to achieve the same thing. There's a huge overlap between all of those. Perhaps each of those names just focuses on, more on one element than another of the overall system that we're looking at. And we need to be not too competitive with each other when we're writing and when we're talking in our briefs to policymakers and the general public. We shouldn't present our new name as being something completely new, but let's draw on the history, let's show how it's integrated, and perhaps the best way of doing that is by having that common vision that several people mentioned from the floor, and that I feel is very important, that we have a positive vision that we're heading towards, and that is perhaps something more than anything that we can communicate to policymakers, because they are hopefully looking to the future and partly to the votes that they're trying to get. In terms of communication, I think it's important not just to communicate directly with the top policymakers, but with their advisors, who are often the ones who are in post longer term. We need to educate them. We need to have a much stronger program of educating the media. Having good environment correspondence can make all the difference, because scientists can't do everything. I found myself as a scientist that I'm expected to do all sorts of things. I'm expected to learn to be a brilliant communicator. It's something that you learn slowly and painfully, but there are people who are trained to communicate. So let's work with people who have that as a professional training to help us communicate our message properly. And I guess in the end, the big issue we have is that the world is changing faster than it ever has, for the human population at least. And so science, apart from being good, as we've said, inspiring to people with a good vision, it's got to be adaptive and dynamic. We have to keep moving forward in our work. Thank you.
From all the presentation, also the first question about the gap between science and politics. And I think a key issue I would like to raise is the institution issue. Actually, with all this fast changing in the world, we have a completely different pattern of institutions. And the key roles for agroforestry now are different from the key roles of agroforestry some years ago. For instance, in my country, if I go briefly to the list of the ministries which are related to the issue, I go to 21 ministries. If some years ago we were concerned mostly about 5 ministries. So you have demands associated to trees and agroforestry growing in different directions. So we have to go through from the local to the global, thinking about institutions. And I think here should be a congress like this should be a very important moment to discuss this completely different world of institution, not just public institution, but also how the stakeholders are represented. So it's a quite interesting game. When I went to be a director in BRAPA, and suddenly I was changed to the one kind of a directorate to the technology transfer. And the first worry I had was to understand better what was the representation of the different levels of institution, just to start working and building some agendas. I think this institutional issue is perhaps one of the most important ones, because through this one, we can actually advance in many scales.
Yeah, thank you very much. May we then appreciate all the participants, the panelists with a clap. That brings me to the end of sharing this session. I want to appreciate you so much. Thank you.